It started with a message, short, simple, and utterly strange. Come see the meadow. Tonight, the flowers bloom. I stared at my phone, the faint blue glow casting eerie shadows across my living room. The sender's number wasn't saved in my contacts, but the text carried a quiet insistence that burrowed into my thoughts. The meadow it mentioned wasn't just any place. It was the meadow, an expanse of land on the edge of town, fenced off and forgotten. People whispered about it in schoolyards and smoky bars, saying it was cursed. I hadn't thought about the place in years. As a kid, I'd been dared to climb its rickety gate. I only made it a few steps before my nerve failed me. Even then, the air around the meadow had felt wrong. Too heavy. Too quiet. I told myself it was just a storybook trick of childhood, a fear that couldn't stand against reason. But now, sitting alone in the dark, with that text burning a hole in my thoughts, I wasn't so sure. The clock struck midnight. Outside, rain clouds churned over the horizon, blotting out the stars. I should have deleted the message and gone to bed. Instead, I grabbed my coat and a flashlight. The streets were empty as I drove through town. Shadows leaned in strange directions, twisting under the orange streetlights. My pulse quickened when the road turned from asphalt to dirt, the tires crunching louder than they should in the stillness. The gate loomed ahead, as broken and rusted as I remembered. Beyond it, the meadow stretched in dark, uneven waves, a patchwork of waist-high grass and weeds. Tonight, though, something was different. A strange glow pulsed through the field, faint but unmistakable. I parked the car and hesitated, my hand on the door handle. I could still leave. But then the sound came. It was faint at first, like a low whistle carried on the breeze. But it grew, twisting into something more unsettling, a sound that made my skin prickle. I stepped out, drawn toward the noise. The gate gave way easily under my hand, swinging open with a groan. The meadow seemed alive. Clusters of flowers stood tall among the weeds, their colors impossibly vibrant. Deep reds, electric blues, golden yellows. The glow I'd seen from the road radiated from their petals, an unnatural bioluminescence. For a moment I was captivated, caught between awe and unease. Then the first scream pierced the air. It wasn't human, at least, not entirely. The pitch wavered, slipping in and out of recognizable tones. I froze, the flashlight shaking in my hand. Another scream joined the first, then another, until a cacophony of voices rose around me. My breath came short and fast, my heart pounding in my chest. The flowers were screaming. I told myself it wasn't real, that it was the wind, or some animal call twisted by the night. But as the cries rose higher, closer, I couldn't ignore the feeling curling in my gut. Something was wrong. I swept the flashlight across the meadow. The beam wavered over patches of flowers, illuminating their strange, shifting faces. The petals quivered, their glowing centers distorting into grotesque shapes. My mind rebelled at what I was seeing, but there was no denying it. The flowers had faces. Their features were crude, like a child's drawing carved into wax. But the mouths were unmistakable. They hung open in frozen agony, emitting that terrible sound. I stumbled backward, my boots catching on the uneven ground. The cries seemed to grow louder, pressing against my skull. I clamped my hands over my ears, but it was useless. The sound wasn't just external. It was inside me, vibrating in my bones. "Get a grip," I muttered, forcing myself to breathe. I couldn't turn back now, not with the glow still pulsing ahead, deeper into the field. Something, or someone, had sent me that message, and I needed to know why. I pushed forward, each step sinking into the damp earth. The flowers trembled as I passed, their cries following me like a living thing. I tried not to look too closely at their faces, but I couldn't help it. Some were slack and expressionless, while others contorted with emotions I couldn't name. Then I saw it, movement at the corner of my vision. I whipped the flashlight toward the source, but the beam only caught swaying grass. My pulse quickened, the hair on my arm standing on end. Something was out there, watching. Hello? My voice sounded weak, swallowed by the night. A figure stepped into view, its outline barely visible in the gloom. It wore a wide-brimmed hat that obscured its face, and its posture was unnervingly still. My hand tightened on the flashlight. The figure didn't speak. It simply raised an arm and pointed deeper into the meadow. I hesitated, my instincts screaming at me to turn and run. But the figure's presence was magnetic, drawing me forward. I took a step, then another, until the glow at the heart of the meadow swallowed me whole. That's when the flowers stopped screaming. The silence was worse. The silence was suffocating. After the relentless, inhuman cries, the absence of sound pressed against my chest, making it hard to breathe. I glanced over my shoulder, but the figure in the wide-brimmed hat was gone, swallowed by the dark. The only light came from the flowers, their glow casting distorted shadows that flickered like phantoms across the grass. Something was changing in the meadow. The air felt thick, charged with a strange energy that buzzed at the edge of hearing. The flowers, once quivering with life, now stood deathly still. Their faces were fixed, their eyes wide and unblinking. I swore I could feel their gaze following me as I moved forward. Ahead, the glow became brighter, almost blinding. The grass thinned, giving way to a clearing at the meadow center. And there, rising from the earth like a monument, was a single massive flower. It stood taller than me, its petals unfurling in slow, deliberate motions. The glow emanated from its heart, a pulsing, sickly light that seemed to breathe. I approached cautiously, the beam of my flashlight shaking. As I drew closer, I saw that this flower's face wasn't crude like the others. It was horrifyingly real. The face was a woman's, etched with lines of sorrow and fear. Her lips moved, whispering words I couldn't hear. Her eyes, wide and filled with an agony that made my stomach churn, locked onto mine. "What are you?" I whispered, my voice trembling. The whispers grew louder, and for the first time I understood. They weren't words. They were pleas, begging for release. I staggered back, my head spinning. That's when the vines erupted from the ground. They coiled around my ankles, their grip cold and unyielding. I cried out, kicking at them, but they tightened, dragging me closer to the massive flower. The woman's face twisted, her expression shifting into something cruel, almost triumphant. A low voice echoed through the meadow, deep and guttural, as though the earth itself were speaking. "You have come," it said. "The meadow feeds." I struggled against the vines, my flashlight tumbling from my grasp. The light sputtered out as the clearing was swallowed by darkness. The whispers turned to screams, the faces in the flowers contorting in terror. Something cold brushed against my neck. I turned my head slowly, dread pooling in my stomach. A figure loomed over me, its wide-brimmed hat casting a shadow across its face. But now I could see its hands, gnarled and root-like, dripping with black sap. "You shouldn't have come," it said, its voice a low, grating hiss. "But now you'll serve." The vines pulled harder, and the light from the massive flower surged, bathing everything in a blinding, unnatural glow. The glow seared my eyes, but I couldn't look away. The woman's face in the flower shifted, her features becoming sharper, more pronounced. Her mouth opened wide, her scream reverberating in my chest. The vines around my legs pulsed in time with her cry, their grip like iron. I clawed at the ground, my fingers sinking into the cold, damp earth. The figure in the hat watched impassively, its shadow stretching unnaturally long in the flower's light. "Fight if you like," it said, voice dripping with amusement. "They always do." Desperation surged through me. My hand brushed against something hard, the lighter in my pocket. The memory hit me like a bolt. Dry grass, fire spreading fast. It was a long shot, but it was all I had. I fumbled the lighter free, my fingers trembling. The vines sensed my intent, tightening around my wrist as if they could strangle the thought before it formed. With a choked cry, I flicked the lighter. The tiny flame sputtered to life, weak but defiant. I plunged it into the grass at my side. The reaction was immediate. The fire caught, racing through the dry undergrowth. The meadow came alive with screams, louder and more frantic than before. The faces in the flowers contorted, their expressions shifting between pain and rage. The vines recoiled, loosening their grip as the flames spread. The figure in the hat shrieked, a sound so piercing it made my vision blur. Its form wavered, flickering like a shadow in a storm. It reached for me, but the fire leapt higher, cutting it off. I scrambled to my feet, ignoring the searing heat and the smoke filling my lungs. The meadow was ablaze, the fire consuming everything in its path. The massive flower at the center trembled, its glow flickering like a dying bulb. "You cannot escape!" the guttural voice bellowed. "The meadow will not forgive!" But I was already running, my legs numb and my chest burning. The screams faded behind me, replaced by the roar of the fire. I didn't stop until I reached the road. Turning back, I saw the meadow reduced to a sea of flames. The air smelled of ash and something sweet, almost sickly. For a moment I thought I was free. Then I noticed the first bloom, small, delicate, and impossibly bright, sprouting at the edge of the road. A faint scream rose from its glowing face, and I felt my heart sink. The meadow wasn't done with me. Not yet. I stared at the flower, unable to move. Its face, small and faintly glowing, was unmistakable. My own. The resemblance was haunting, like looking into a distorted mirror. Its mouth hung open, emitting a soft, mournful cry that grew louder with every second. I stumbled back, my heart thundering in my chest. The road stretched endlessly before me, but it offered no safety. When I turned toward town, I saw them. Tiny blooms sprouting along the roadside, their faces twisted and familiar. Each one screamed as I passed, their cries rippling through the still night air. The fire hadn't destroyed the meadow. It had spread it. My footsteps echoed on the pavement as I broke into a run. My vision blurred, and the world seemed to tilt beneath me. The road was no longer solid. It felt like running through water, slow and suffocating. The flowers lined the edges of my path, their faces growing clearer and more human. Some were strangers, others were hauntingly familiar. I swore I saw my childhood friend Sarah, who had disappeared years ago. Her flower face screamed silently, her eyes pleading. The cries pierced my thoughts, an unbearable cacophony that gnawed at the edges of my sanity. I clapped my hands over my ears, but the sound burrowed deeper, vibrating through my skull. "You can't run." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, deep and resonant like the earth itself. My legs faltered as a shadow loomed ahead, the figure in the wide-brimmed hat. It stood in the middle of the road, its face still hidden, its root-like hands outstretched. "The meadow claims what it is owed," it said, its voice dripping with finality. "You carry its seed now. Wherever you go, it will follow." "No!" I screamed, clutching my head. I destroyed it! I burned it to the ground! The figure tilted its head as if amused. Fire cannot kill what was never alive. Around me, the flowers multiplied, their roots cracking through the asphalt and snaking toward my feet. I tried to move, but my body wouldn't obey. The glow from their faces grew brighter, enveloping me in a sickly light. And then I heard it, a scream unlike the others, raw and guttural. It took me a moment to realize it was my own. The last thing I saw was the petals curling around me, soft and cold as they swallowed the world whole. Somewhere far away, in a quiet town untouched by rumors of the meadow, a flower blooms. Its face glows faintly in the moonlight, its mouth frozen open in a scream no one can hear yet.